Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is the Super Marcato Brothers here, and we're going to be doing something kind of exciting today. We're going to be taking a listen to both albums of Hello World, our recent double album that pays tribute to Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island. You know, if you guys have seen our promo video, then you'll know a little bit about this project, but it's something that all three of us have been really excited about and just can't wait to share with everybody. So we're glad that it's finally released.
For sure.
Once again, my name is Will Brueggemann.
My name is Karl Brueggemann. Thanks to guys for joining us as we take this musical trip through our most recent project, Hello World. And we're also joined today by our third brother, Marty.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, and all three of us collaborated very heavily on this album. It's been about like five or 6 months, I think, working on this. So we're really excited to get to share this with everybody. The track you heard playing in with was the first track from the first album, fittingly enough. The track is called Welcome to Mushroom Land, and the first album is called Hello World, Adventures in Mushroom Land. And this track was actually co-written by Karl and myself, and basically what it is you hear two distinct sections in this song, and that's how the crediting works. Karl wrote the entire first part, and I wrote the second part.
And at this point, if anyone doesn't know, our first volume, which is Adventures in Mushroom Land, is inspired and modeled after the very first Super Mario World game, which came out in 1990 for the SNES. So all the tracks in this volume are modeled after the musical style that Koji Kondo established in that game.
Totally. So we kind of saw that track as sort of a title screen and an introduction theme, and now we're going to really get into the meat and potatoes. The first track that we're going to really talk about here is the Overworld theme, and this track is called Jump On In, and this was composed by Marty. You guys are listening to Overworld. This is track 2 from Adventures in Mushroom Land. And yeah, this was really the main theme of this first project. Similarly to most Mario games, Koji, writes a main theme, and then he does all these variations, which is what we did with this project as well. But yeah, Marty composed this Overworld. So Marty, you want to talk a little bit about kind of the inspirations when you were writing this?
Yeah, absolutely. Front and center, my inspiration was Koji Kondo and his incredible gift at universal and bite-sized melodies in the case of Mario.
Right.
But I didn't want to simply sort of follow in his footsteps in terms of, melodic gestures or chord changes per se.
Well, yeah, I think you wanted to go broader with capturing the spirit, but not necessarily. This doesn't really sound anything like the Mario World Overworld, other than the same instruments and the same type of a spirit. The melody is, definitely its own thing. And I think that's what's cool is that it's its own piece of music, but it's definitely inspired by that original Overworld.
Well, that's great. That was definitely the goal. Also, while writing it, I was trying to keep in the back of my mind the variations that Koji used in Super Mario World.
Right.
And tried to make sure that whatever melody I was working on would ultimately work in those variations.
Well, I think you really accomplished that. I mean, this Overworld was such an important track in deciding what we were going to use for it was kind of a process.
Well, yeah, all three of us actually submitted a track because we couldn't decide who was going to do this main theme. And actually, the first thing you heard, that title screen, was actually what my submission originally was for the Overworld. And later on, there's a track that was originally Will's submission. So it's cool we actually were able to use all three.
But yeah, I think this Overworld works super well, and it totally captures the spirit of Super Mario World, and it's a very Koji Kondo-like melody, something that we all really attempted to do, and we really studied a lot of his music.
Absolutely. So now we're going to move on to the third track, Portobello Garden Map. Portobello Garden Map, the first map theme in Adventures in Mushroom Land. And once again, this track was also composed by Marty.
Yeah, this was honestly a real treat. I've always loved Koji's map music, in Mario 3, Mario World, really in all of his games. And so with this one, kind of like how all three of us approach this album, it's almost as though there's this parallel universe to Super Mario World. So it's some familiar kind of musical language and style, but it's just a little bit different than you're expecting, kind of bringing us into a waltz sort of atmosphere. I thought would be really fun and sort of see like, okay, how far can we push it and still have it feel like a Mario World map?
Absolutely. And this was fun for me to hear because I could hear the inspiration of something like Donut Plains, but again, having it be in a waltz, having it be a different tempo, definitely establishes its own identity too, which is again, really what we tried to do for this whole project.
Right. Well, something really important that we need to discuss is how we were able to make this music sound like it was on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that's kind of the elephant in the room, isn't it? So as you guys probably are aware, we made both of these albums using actual samples ripped from the SNES. We got the SPC files of both of these games, and we were able to solo the individual channels, whether it was the bass or the brass or any of the instruments, to rip multiple samples of every single instrument in order to have the freedom to get all the sounds that we wanted.
Right. And what Karl means by samples, it's not like what you think of samples in the hip-hop world. We're not taking chunks of music. It would literally just be, we would find moments where there'd be different sustained notes, and then you put those sustained notes, samples that we use, through a little sample player, and then we're able to trigger it like it's its own instrument.
So really, we're trying our best to, as closely as possible, emulate how the Super Nintendo were to manipulate those samples. So again, we ripped a sample, a single note, maybe it was just like a da, and that was it. And then using a sample player, we kind of pitch it up and down in a similar way that the Super Nintendo did. So now let's move on.
Pretty painstaking.
But it was really rewarding as well. So now we'll move on to the athletic. This is Quick on Your Feet. This is The Athletic. It's called Quick on Your Feet. It's track 4 from our first volume of Hello World, and this is one of the tracks that Will was responsible for arranging. So it's always fun in these arrangements because you are able to incorporate new melodic material, which is true here. Will wrote some new sections, but he's also taking that melody, but showcasing it in a different light, and I think Will did a great job of not only kind of evoking the kind of the high-spirited energy of the world athletic theme, but it establishes its own identity, in my opinion. Will, really nice job with this track.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. I was really I really wanted to make sure that it sounded a lot like ragtime, because if you listen to the original Super Mario World Athletic, that's really what it is. And the entire
that stride
track,
piano, so great.
This one included just utilizes that one piano sample. So I really wanted to make something that sounds idiomatic for that type of piano playing.
And yeah, Will, was this ever a challenge to have a track only based on that piano sample? A lot of pitch problems, weren't there, with this?
Right. Yeah, this was actually one of the few tracks that I sequenced myself, and it was for that very same reason, because there kind of needed to be a close relationship between the music that I was writing and the implementation of it. But for the most part, Karl actually sequenced most of the tracks that we're going to be playing today, with a few exceptions.
Yeah, it was kind of fun early on in the project. At least in my opinion, I was like, you know what? I really feel like it would probably be better if Will and Marty were to take more of the compositional reins, just because it's the kind of music that is so natural for them to write. Not that I can't, but I just thought it would be fun if I would take maybe a heavier role on the implementation side and for them to have a heavier role on the composition side. And It worked out really well.
Well, something that we like to do on all of our albums is explore the different possibilities of collaboration.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to the underwater variation. This is Hold Your Breath. You guys are listening to Underwater. You just heard the Yoshi bongo drums come in there. This was one of the tracks that I was responsible for arranging. I had a really good time with this one. I wanted to have at least one track on the album where after the loop finished, then the Yoshi came on to kind of give you the sense of like jumping on Yoshi. So I was glad to do that for this track.
Something that I want to say really quick, if you guys haven't listened to these albums all the way through, definitely run on over to our website, supermarcatobrothers.com, and pick up both of these albums. They're pay what you want, so you can get them for free. But definitely I would listen to them fully before you hear all the things we have to say, because we want you guys to have, unaltered versions of this musical experience before we talk about it for you.
For sure.
Yeah. No, so pleased with this one. Really capturing the different landscapes in Mario World. Mm-hmm. We knew from the beginning that was so important to really make the whole project feel believable, like it was its own game.
Yeah.
And here you're just underwater, and then like you say, Karl, as soon as the bongos come in, you're riding Yoshi. I've got to say, I so love the intro of this song.
Oh, cool.
It's not something I was expecting, and then when Karl first shared the track, it's like yes, that's
those arpeggiated square colors were really fun to write.
Well, guys, let's talk a little bit what goes into making a Mario underwater track. What are the similarities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think one thing is it has to be really colorful and bubbly, like not literally, but musically it has to be really bubbly. And for me, the way that I tried to evoke that was with those beep, 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 boop, beep, 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 beep. It was just like, I don't know, it just had a certain pace
or something.
And obviously when you think about the tradition of Koji Kondo, starting from the very first Mario game, it has to be a waltz. And when Marty gave us his main theme, a piano demo, which is how we shared almost every idea for a new track. He gave us a demo of him playing on the piano. He also did some variations. So basically the main A section is kind of modeled after Marty's initial idea, and he did it as a waltz and kind of altered the chords and altered the melody a little bit. But it was fun for me to kind of take that and run with it and kind of alter it just enough so that it feels different, but also feels familiar.
Right. Yeah, and I particularly love in the B section the sort of like chromatic leading tone in there.
Cool, man.
It just feels very, romantic.
Well, now we're going to move on to the boss theme. This is Brawlin' with the Spike Tykes. This is Brawlin' with the Spike Tykes. This is one of the tracks that Will composed. It's the boss theme from our first volume. Love this, Will.
So yeah, this was, I was quite worried about having to write this track, because how we decided we were going to do the album is we sort of figured, okay, we're essentially creating new soundtracks. So, we need a boss theme, we need an overworld and athletic, things like that. But the original Super Mario World boss theme is so shreddy and complicated and filled with all this beautiful and lush, crazy jazz harmony. And it was a track that just I couldn't even understand. So I actually, before I even wrote this, I transcribed the original track completely by ear to figure out all the things that were happening with the melody, and I played it a lot and listened to it a lot. And then when I felt like my soul was just consumed with that boss theme, then I started to
really, until you are able to open that up and dissect that, you're right, how would you even go about doing something that would fit alongside that, or in an alternate universe would be like, let's say Koji Kondo didn't write that theme, but he was still in a similar headspace, or if someone else were to give him the task, to be instructed by him, or okay, write something like that, how are you going to do it, Well,
I think the thing that I'm happy with is this doesn't really, melodically or anything, it's not too close to his original one, but I think I kind of understood more on a broad level what makes that original track good, and I tried to go for some of those same effects.
Yeah, one thing I want to say, I think it's an important thing to say, and it's hard to explain a project like this to a lot of people, is our intention, and no matter what we did, there's no way we could ever replace or really try to, I guess, compete with the original music. What we were trying to do is to show a different side than you got to hear in Mario World, so it's fun. Later on, especially, we have a track that is like a winter, like a snow track, it was fun for us to think, what if there was something like that in Mario World? So again, it's a way for us to honor Koji Kondo, but to try to do something new at the same time.
Yeah, and I've got to say, just speaking for myself, it's probably one of the most difficult compositional challenges there is. It's it's almost like a deadlift of an incredible amount of weight, because the goal is you're trying to get into that same space. You want it to feel like it's emotionally true to his world, but none of us we're not trying to imitate anything. We're not trying to copy. We're not trying to take advantage of any existing music.
Yeah, in some ways.
So it's really difficult, because you have to kind of create that line for yourself. And the three of us have to agree. It's like, okay, is this capturing the spirit of it? But we don't want to go too close. We want it to live as its own piece of music.
And guys, there were a couple times in the course of the project where we did get a little too close, and we had to go back to the drawing board and start over. And that was really it's always heart-wrenching when that has to happen. But and really, in a lot of ways, the intention is similar for someone, I would imagine, like Michiru Yokota, where he has to write new music that feels new and fresh, but he's also going back and he's also in something like Mario Galaxy, you knew he was studying the music of Koji Kondo. So really, that's kind of another thing we were inspired by, is these other Nintendo composers that wrote new music for the Mario series.
Or like Kazumi Tataka or
Absolutely.
anybody like that.
Mahito Yokota is a great example, because really you could look at Gusty Garden as him doing an imitation of Good Egg Galaxy.
Absolutely.
You know, because Good Egg basically got the gold stamp from Miyamoto and from the team, and it was then that Yokota realized, like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing.
Yep.
And he delivered essentially the main theme of the game.
Awesome. Now we're going to move on to Chamomile Forest Map. You guys are listening to Chamomile Forest Map. This is the second map theme in our first volume. This was composed by Will, and it's so beautiful. One thing that I like about this track is, I would say out of any track in either of the volumes, this stands on its own more than anything. It's not inspired by any specific track. It really is its own piece of music, but at the same time, I could hear this as a Mario map.
Well, I think my biggest influence was Koji Kondo in general, whether it's something from Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past, Mario World. I mean, I wanted to capture the mysterious feeling of Forest of Illusion.
Well, in general, Koji's forest music, it always has that air of mystery, doesn't it?
And his forest music really is a bridge, like, between the two series.
Yeah, when you think about Mario and Zelda, for sure. That's a good point. Beautiful track. Now we're going to move on to Winter in Mushroom Land. This is Winter in Mushroom Land. This was that track I mentioned before, that this was Will's original submission for an Overworld theme, and, you know, we loved it so much. We decided to go with Marty's because of the ability to manipulate it so well, and it just felt immediate. But this is such a great theme, so we're glad we got to use this for kind of like an Overworld 2 in a lot of ways. And,
yeah, it's sort of a B theme.
Yeah, and those sleigh bells really help to evoke the winter feel, of course. But yeah, Marty, you were talking when we were playing this about kind of the purpose of this track.
Yeah, those of us that grew up with Super Mario World tend to really have fond feelings about the music, but when you actually sit down and listen to the soundtrack as an album, there's so much repetition of the main theme that it can actually get a little bit samey. So we started thinking it would be really nice if we did do the variation of the Overworld, but also had another theme that got to have its own variation, which you'll hear in a bit. Yep. And in keeping with our sort of alternate universe, we get to have a winter level, which Super Mario World doesn't, but boy, just hearing it with this Super Nintendo instruments, you really can picture it.
Well, and it's a way for us, you know, in the game, you get to listen to themes again and again and again because you're playing a game, but with this album, you know, you have a track, then you go on to the next one. Yeah. So this was sort of our second attempt of getting to tackle, you know, what makes the Mario Overworld great, and having multiple examples of sort of similar inspirations on the same album kind of reinforces.
Yeah, and again, another opportunity to do a theme in variation, so you're going from a winter to a desert level. So with our next track, this is Slither Snake Sandbox. You guys are listening to Slither Snake Sandbox, which, our alert listeners may notice that this is a variation of the Winter in Mushroom Land melody. This was also arranged by Will. I worked on this track, sequenced it, and I think I incorporated one really small melodic nugget that you'll hear later. But yeah, this is pretty much all composed by Will. What was fun is to incorporate some Eastern percussion, some hand percussion, some tabla, and that big shaker, that reek. One thing is some of those samples were actually from other games. Like, for example, the hand percussion was actually from Chrono Trigger. Oh, and also the track before that, Sleigh Bell, was, I think, from Earthbound. So it's fun to rip samples from other games. Well, guys, we're going to quickly fade back up because this actually has a cool ending. Let's take a listen to the ending of this track. And again, I think that was Will's idea to actually make the track stop so it feels like you just died. And he wrote, had to write a game over jingle just for this track.
And the cool thing, again, if you guys notice that what the game over jingle is, it's an arrangement of the intro to the Winter and Mushroom Land theme. That it's at a quicker tempo.
So it's a really good kind of wrapping the package to end this 2-part series. It's pretty cool. Good way to wrap it up. Well, now we're going to move on to bonus. You guys are listening to Bonus. This was composed by Marty, and I think it might be my personal favorite track in this first album.
That's so cool.
It's just oozing with fun. It's just really, really fun to listen to, and it was so rewarding for me to be able to sequence this one and make this come alive with SNES samples. And I gotta say, at this point, I do think this is a definitive version of this track. When he showed me the demo, I thought it sounded really good, but now it's really cool to hear this, where sometimes I kind of forget that this was even sequenced. Like, it just feels like it fits right in that world.
Right.
That's so great, man. No, you really knocked this one out of the park as far as the sequencing goes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got to say, I so love the intro of the bonus theme in Super Mario World. Mm-hmm. So much so that when the sort of song proper kicks in, it's, I won't use this word, but it's almost disappointing. Oh, I guess I did just use the word.
No, I know what you're saying.
And so this is, from the beginning, I was thinking like, oh, I'd really love to do a bonus that sort of kept that promise of what to me felt like a vaudeville, like Step Right Up.
Old Hollywood.
Sort of and so
Las Vegas.
Yeah, I sort of went sort of like an old Hollywood, Las Vegas, late 30s, early 40s kind of route with it. And somehow the combination of that with the really fun, Technicolor sequencing, it's just, I don't know, it feels like you're really playing a game. And Will made an interesting observation when we were finally listening to the whole album in sequence, is that you go right from the sort of abrupt game over into this bonus. And before you know it, you really believe like you're in the world of a video game. It
feels like you're inside a video game. Yeah, this is probably the one that I'm the most proud of sequencing, probably for both of the projects. I think this one turned out really well.
We're nearing the end of the album.
Yep, so now we're going to move on to Coco Wasteland Map. guys are listening to Coco Wasteland Map. This is the third map theme in the first project. This is one that I composed. Definitely wanted to have some sort of tension, because that was a one part of Mario World that wasn't represented at this point when we were working on the project. So I definitely thought this is a good opportunity to, have a little bit of influence from something like Vanilla Dome or Valley of Bowser, just a little bit of the darkness that, that's not the norm for Mario World either, but it is in there. So it's fun to capture that with this
one. And a little bit of that groove and that that awesome sort of drum
slap
beat.
bass and the drum kit,
which is part of Mario World, even if that might not be our first thought. But honestly, when I played the whole album for my wife, it was probably like 2 seconds into this track, she's like, "Karl."
It's
just so groovy, and
that's cool,
it just
man.
had this groove integrity.
That's so great. Another thing that I like about this track, it's another example. We have this a few times on the first half where we really wanted to capture the harmonic world of Super Mario World, which has a lot more jazziness than Mario had previously. It's something that I wanted to do in my little intro at the end of track 1. It's something in the boss theme. I think we get a little bit of it here, but definitely this track, just those chords have sort of a jazzy richness that...
Yeah, basically, they're just major 7th chords that are chromatically going from, for example, like an F major 7 to an F sharp major 7, which, really are pretty chords, but when you're playing them that way, it does kind of feel dark in a way too. So,
and the sequencing is pretty badass.
Thanks a lot, dude. Now we're going to move on to the Fortress theme. This is Lower the Drawbridge. You guys are listening to Lower the Drawbridge. This is a Fortress theme, and this one was composed by Marty. Really nice job, man. I was worried about this track because I was a little bit concerned that, are we going to just try to do like a poor man's Fortress? Like, are we going to try to do dooby-dooby-dooby-dooby-dooby-dooby-dooby? But really, the way that you establish your own identity with this one, it does not sound that much like the Mario World Fortress, but it's definitely clear kind of the intention, and it does fit the Fortress, and it's a great variation of your main theme, but again, it feels like its own piece of music, which I'm so happy with.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I think I was really trying to listen to where the Overworld theme wanted to go, if it went in a minor direction.
Well, it's actually really powerful, the course of the album, because there's a long time before you get to this variation. The last variation we heard was track 5. So going from track 5 to 12, it's been a long time. So hopefully the listener will be somewhat moved by hearing it again after so long.
Right.
That's a really nice observation. And yeah, as far as looking to what Koji did, I guess I just was trying to look almost further back to maybe what some of those classical influences were. So I kind of almost set Koji's piece aside and was just looking at it fresh, like, okay, I'm going to make this minor adaptation of the Overworld, really drawing more from, Bach or Beethoven influences than anything else.
Right. The other thing that I love is the intro. You get just a hint of that, not quite atonal, but the fact that sequence is so kind of dissonant, it almost harks back to the serialism of the Super Mario 3 Fortress theme.
Now we're going to move on to the final track. This is Farewell Mushroom Land. You guys are listening to Farewell Mushroom Land. This is our ending, obviously influenced by the staff roll from Super Mario World, and Will composed the main theme, the A section, and I composed that bridge section. It was a really cool collaboration. I really am a big fan of how Will reharmonized it once it comes back to that theme and does a lot of good tempo changes. This part here, it almost feels like there'll be like dancers doing a can. The way they slow down the tempo, it's really on the nose. Let's quickly fade back up so you can guys hear the ending. It's fun. It's almost like this little SNES jazz band at the end there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
no, you guys really nailed it on this credits.
Thanks, dude.
Capturing the not only sort of the emotion, but really the sort of musical styles that he was drawing from. And I've got to say, it's a little bit of an emotional experience, listening to this and getting the sense that, this fantasy game is over.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one was such a big deal for me because the Super Mario World credits is possibly one of my favorite pieces of music of all time. So this was a lot of pressure to kind of write this.
Fans of the podcast are aware of that, Will. We've gushed over it.
It was such a big deal writing this one. This was my second attempt at a theme, and I'm really happy, with how the whole thing turned out. So,
with that, let's move on to our second volume, Journey to Dino Island. We're going to start off with the first track, Storytime Lullaby.
We're listening to Storytime Lullaby, the first track from Hello World, Journey to Dino Island. This melody that I wrote, I feel very attached to because I actually wrote it for our nephew, who at the time that I wrote, this is an actual lullaby with lyrics, like a song that I wrote, and he wasn't born yet, so it was kind of me imagining what it would be like when he was born. So I feel very emotionally attached.
Yeah, and then
to
I
this
remember
piece.
When it came time for this project and it was like, okay, we need a lullaby, I was like, I think we're all like, Will, we got to use that lullaby you wrote for James. I mean, I can't imagine you writing a better lullaby than that.
Well,
so
and I think the good thing is my musical sensibility is so influenced by Mario and Koji Kondo.
So even when you're not trying to, you are.
Yeah, that's the ironic thing. And this is another one that I did sequence myself with those music box instruments. It's a little funny story behind the scenes. They had a lot of intonation problems, so it was kind of a lot of work trying to make sure everything was in tune.
So much so that it's the only track that uses them. And in the credits, I suggested, hey, what if we use those again? Will was like, no, dear God, never use those again. So now we're going to move on to track 2, Down on Dino Island. You guys are listening to Down on Dino Island, what would be the title screen of the second game, and this is a track that I composed, and it was really rewarding to do this because the original title screen to Yoshi's Island is so different and unique from the rest of the game. It's got a little bit more swashbuckling and tropical, so it's fun to capture that, but also, again, I wanted to make it unique. I wanted to make it its own thing as well.
Yeah, well, I think this happens to be my favorite track. It's really hard to choose because there's so much music on these albums, but this might be my favorite of both albums. And what I love about it is the piece itself is so independent and really, though, melodically captures what a lot of the Yoshi music is, which is very childlike and accessible. But also with the sequencing, you were able to be so on the nose with the original track that I think it's maybe the best instance of walking the line between old and new.
Oh, thanks,
I can totally see that. You know, I was saying while we were listening that this piece just really takes me someplace. I feel like I'm in some 16-bit island. I'm in that kind of tropical world of Koji Kondo. But Karl, I was re-listening to the Yoshi's Island soundtrack, and I forgot the ocean sounds and all the sound effects in there. Those aren't what I'm hearing here. So these are samples from other games, presumably.
Yeah, and that was also fun. There are some of the same, like the seagull, for example, is from Yoshi's Island, but I wanted it to sound different too. I didn't want it to be the exact same sound. So actually, I got some ocean sounds and some wind sounds from Chrono Trigger and mixed those with some of the Yoshi's Island sounds to kind of make it its own sound there.
Man, that's great.
Now we're going to move on to track 3, Roll Egg Roll. So good. This is Coconut Grove, also called Roll Egg Roll. This was composed by Marty, and obviously, you know, some nods to Flower Garden from Yoshi's Island, and
otherwise
Marty,
known as Make Eggs, Throw Eggs.
It's just so groovy. It's one of my favorite contributions from you from both sides of this project. You said a funny thing about that bridge section. What did you just say before we faded this down about that?
At the very end of the bridge, it kind of escalates in a sort of funky bass town. And I was just telling Karl, it's like, at that point, I was just fixated on like, okay, I want Karl to just like love this. I just want him to
well,
eat this
mission
up.
accomplished.
And
I love it.
I think the first text I got back from him was like, oh, I love that funky bass part. But yeah, this one, I was really excited that I would get to work on the track that was kind of inspired by Flower Garden, because not only is it such a great song in Yoshi's, but it's such a great, almost unique example from Koji Kondo.
It's so unique. And one of the challenges you had was that initial marimba line and chord progression is so unique and iconic that you couldn't really do anything else. Like, it is slightly different and the rhythms are different, the chords are slightly different, but talk about the challenge of that, because it's in some ways it's kind of ballsy to even do a song like this.
I don't know. I mean, it'll either sound impressive or embarrassing, just, I guess, how much time I kind of put into something like this, really trying to explore every possible option, how close, how far, what is it that makes it what it is, what is it that makes it sort of a style. I remember reading an interview with the composer for the movie Chicken Run, and it was really important that they do like a Great Escape type cue, and he was saying, he's like, but the Great Escape cue, that's its own style of music.
Yes.
There aren't other pieces of music that use those techniques. And that's a lot of times what we are running into here, and what I think other game composers run into when they're...
Like the Star Wars composers.
Right, when they're working on subsequent titles. So it was tough. My first draft of this song, I was really liking. I was just playing my guitar and just trying to write some kind of like bossa nova tune. And I really loved it, but I think I was enjoying it so much. I was really laid back, and when I tried to bring it up to the tempo I wanted, it just wasn't working. So this is sort of a later idea. But yeah, this was something we shared on our YouTube video, kind of showing a behind the scenes of the project, and feedback was seemed to be really positive on this, which is really
one of my favorites. Now we're going to move on to the first map theme, First Foot Forward. This is First Foot Forward, the first map theme from Journey to Dino Island. This one is composed by Will.
Yeah, I'm really super happy with how this one turned out. It's one of my favorite contributions that I got to make to the album, and the story behind it is kind of interesting, actually. If you guys have heard the album already, the track called King Twizzle's Tantrum, that's sort of a bluesier track that uses like electric piano, and so I wrote the theme in that style, and then I had this idea, what if for the map music, I did it in a more kind of traditional
sonorous
Disney sort of sound.
Well, it worked out really well.
Yeah, I would never have believed that this would become, one of my favorite tracks in the album. And then the interesting experience is when you're playing through the whole thing, when you get to that King Twizzle's track, it ends up just feeling like, oh, that's cute, like a nice little blues arrangement.
But that actually came first. Fun fact.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to Watermelon Hill, also known as Monkey See, Monkey Do. You guys are listening to Monkey See, Monkey Do, which, if you're a really big fan of the Yoshi's Island music, you'll probably recognize some influence from the Overworld from Yoshi's Island. It's kind of confusing because there are two tracks in Yoshi's Island that I kind of consider Overworld. Flower Garden, and then there's a separate Overworld, which is more like child-friendly. Touch Fuzzy Get Dizzy is what that one is called. But this one, Will had a really good time because he kind of went to, the origins, the inspiration of Koji Kondo for the music of Yoshi's Island, one of them being African folk music.
Well, yeah, I was reading various interviews with Koji Kondo, and it just happens in the last year he's done multiple interviews talking about Yoshi's Island music, which was so helpful. But one of the things that I had always suspected that he confirmed is that he was listening to a lot of African folk music at the time. And I love African music. As far as folk music goes, I think it's one of my favorites because so much of it is really melodic and
it's
very
catchy.
Pure harmonically. Yeah. And it's the inspirations of jazz and pop music. So I think it really lends itself well to video game music. So as much as this track was a tribute to Koji Kondo and Yoshi's Island, I think a big part of it for me was sort of a tribute to a lot of African folk music.
Now let's move on to score. You guys are listening to Score. This is another one that was composed by Will. It starts off with a little fanfare, something like make a stage complete, and then it moves into this score theme. Will, what were your thoughts when you were writing this one?
Well, again, I kind of wanted to get into what Marty was talking about with the bonus for the last album, kind of a similar harmonic world. In this track, I was really trying to focus on using a lot of chromaticism because that's sort of a staple of the original bonus theme. But I wanted something that was just really fun, kind of
right.
Something that felt very victorious and just kind of like, you've beaten the level, now let's have a party.
Now we're going to move on to Castle Island. You guys are listening to Castle Island, and it's so cute because I love the name of this. This is Marty's original, in some ways, working title of this track, because Yoshi's Island, and it's a castle theme, and it just stuck. I just really like the title, Castle Island.
Yeah, and I think while I was working on these soundtracks, I was trying to see how far could I push that. It's like, okay, is every new piece for this album, could it be its own island?
What I love about this, Marty, is, again, you're going to other composers that influenced Koji Kondo. It's not just being influenced by the Yoshi's Island castle, but you're going, what are some of the other classical composers that you were thinking of? I hear Tchaikovsky a little bit.
Yeah, definitely like a Tchaikovsky influence, a lot of other sort of, late romantic Russian composers. But, even some sort of modern film scores too. But, really pleased with how this all came together. This was one where I was so used to sort of playing it on the piano, and then my mind was going to a different place and almost hearing a full orchestra do it, where it took a certain amount of work with the sequencing to get it to a place where it felt like, okay, this is the definitive representation of it.
Now let's move on to the second map theme, To the Top of Mount Eek. You guys are listening to the second map theme from Journey to Dino Island. This is To the Top of Mount Eek. This is one that I arranged, and obviously it's arranging Will's first map theme. We wanted to kind of do what Yoshi's Island did, is every single world you get to in Yoshi's Island, it adds more instruments, and like the party gets bigger. It's the same map theme, but it's just at the end it gets to the point where you're almost like Mardi Gras. It's just this really great party, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with this one.
Yeah, this was such a fun experience for me to get to listen to an arrangement not made by me of a piece that I wrote, and it kind of helped to solidify that this really could be in an alternate universe Yoshi's Island game.
Now we're going to move on to the athletic theme of this second album. This is Try to Keep Up. so much fun. You guys are listening to the athletic theme. This is Try to Keep Up from Journey to Dino Island. This was composed by Marty, and I am in love with this theme. I was looking forward to this for so long. Marty was assigned to this track early on, but I just couldn't wait for him to finish it because I am a really big fan of Dixie music. It's kind of music that I played in college, and it was fun for me to sequence this one because I was able to kind of take more reins of, for example, that snare drum beat, trying to make it feel authentic to Dixieland. But all of the parts were there. I mean, the material that Marty gave me was just so strong. It was such a joy to sequence this one, dude.
Oh gosh, thanks so much, guys. When we first divvied up who is going to do which track on both of these albums, I was both so pleased because in many ways I felt like I was assigned some of my favorite tracks from both albums and the ones that are really important to me, but I was also really petrified for the same reason.
Some of the biggest ones.
This was one where until the idea came, I just tried to almost block it out of my mind because I would have really psyched myself out.
Right.
You listened to a lot of Dixieland to prepare for this because I gave you that CD.
Yeah, Will had given me a CD, and prior to that, I had been acquiring a lot of Dixieland music.
Yeah, the number one thing that this track, in my opinion, does is it's immediately catchy. It gets in your head after about 5 seconds.
Right.
And I will say that the athletic theme, the Donut Lifts that Koji wrote for Yoshi's Island, might be my absolute favorite theme he's ever. It's such a great theme. It's so daunting.
Yeah, it's so beloved. So it was a real challenge, and it was such a relief as this one started coming together. I mean, I was walking in the parking garage after work, where all of a sudden it just somehow this fell into my head and grabbed me. And yeah, I think the demo that I made for these guys, I was just singing it while playing the guitar. So it was
maybe
fun
at some point we'll have to share that with people.
Yeah, it was kind of fun going
fun
from that to this incredibly well realized Super Nintendo version.
Well, now we're going to move on to the underground theme. This is The Caves of Mr. Mole. You guys are listening to The Caves of Mr. Mole. This is one of the tracks that I composed for this side of the project. It's the underground theme. Obviously, my inspiration was the underground caves theme from Yoshi's Island, and it was a kind of a challenge because that track again is so. I composed 3 tracks in this album, and all 3 of them were the oddball tracks in the original Yoshi's Island. All 3 of them were so not the norm musically from the rest of the game. So sure. I knew I wanted to take those because I thought they would be fitting for me, but it was challenging because I didn't have as much material to work with, so I had to kind of just be confident with doing something different and hoping that it worked, you know?
Sure.
Well, yeah, this one ended up being another one of just my favorites, just here. Because it's such a change of pace for the album, and the sequencing is so much fun. But also, I think with this and another track that you were kind of alluding to there, you did a great job of capturing the other style of Koji Kondo's writing, the style that maybe isn't as identifiable, but it's like it's still his type of melody-centric brain doing different genres of music.
Thanks so much, dude. Yeah, no, this one was really fun, especially to sequence. Like, it really kind of gave me opportunity to kind of stretch out and do some really fun things that I wasn't able to do before this point in the project, you know, having a lot of really cool kind of crystal colors, those arpeggio colors. The percussion that's used in this track is just so iconic, so it's fun to be able to use that too. Now we're going to move on to Jackpot Baby.
cool. This is Jackpot Baby. This is another one that I wrote, and this is sort of meant to be like a bonus stage. Again, I was kind of trying to channel a similar harmonic landscape that I did on the score and the lullaby, where it's sort of that early 20th century type of harmony, something like Take Me Out to the Ball Game. But this is actually a melody I was very proud of and feel very connected to. And I'm actually glad that it gets to have sort of a dinky little unimportant role in the album, because I think a lot of Koji Kondo's music works like that, where, you know, a small little unimportant theme will be really beautiful and actually really moving.
A great example of that is File Select from Mario 64. It's like, who would have think of do something that beautiful? But that's one of my favorite melodies of that whole game.
So gorgeous.
Sort of here in this one. Yeah, this one, like you said, it's kind of plunky and dinky, but it's a beautiful melody, just like the original Yoshi's bonus was.
Yeah. And Will, this piece has a life outside of this project as well, correct?
Yeah, there's a totally separate arrangement using this melody that's sort of an art song of sorts that I'm working on at school, actually.
Really fun. Well, now we're going to move on to the track we alluded to earlier. This is King Twizzle's Tantrum. You guys are listening to King Twizzle's Tantrum, and once again, this is the original idea that Will had, but at this point in the album, it's so fun to feel like, oh, I recognize that theme, and it's a variation. With that, let's move on to the second to last track on the album. This is the final boss theme, the legendary Baby Brawl. You guys are listening to the legendary Baby Brawl.
Ooh, that is smoking.
Dude, legendary
this is
indeed.
a track that I composed for the project. This is the final boss of this disc.
Karl, I am blown away by this track, but
Thank
honestly,
you.
the thing that most people probably won't be expected by what I'm blown away by is the melody. I mean, I could never have imagined a melody this perfect and on the nose to what the original one is. I mean, you capture everything that makes that melody great, all the little bluesy inflections. Obviously, the sequencing is great, and the kind of prog rock feel to it is so on the nose, but that melody is just so great.
Thank you. Yeah, particularly on that final section, the din 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 din. That was a section where I really wanted to go out and do something really proggy, because that's what Koji did in this track. It really sounds like prog rock if you listen to his final boss theme. So it was really fun. It was a one where I waited until the very end of the project to compose compose it because I wanted to make sure it was a good idea, and I kind of had it in my head, and it was tinkering around in my brain for about 2 months until I finally let it out. So
cool.
Really fun.
Yeah, I'm totally with Will on this one. In addition to the prog influences, what I love about this track is I feel like it captures the era in which Yoshi's Island was made. You know, like I feel like I'm back in that 16-bit era, which I don't know. I've got to say it's really touching.
Awesome. Yeah.
Let's fade up right here for the end.
And with that, we've reached the final track of our project Hello World. The final track is Happily Ever After. It's the ending theme to Journey to Dino Island. We just want to say thank you guys so much for joining us as we kind of took you on this musical journey through this project. We are so excited to finally have this project done and to share it with the world. And I just got to say thank you to both of you guys for putting so much effort into this project. We really, all of us, I really will say that we poured our heart and soul into this.
Well, likewise, man. I mean, this has just been such a treat. It's been a long journey, but I'm glad it's over. Not because, I wanted it to be over, but just because I'm so excited to, get to share this with everybody.
Guys, I've got to say, I'm so grateful to have been a part of this project. It was so fun working with both of you and on something that's really so dear to my heart. And anyone who's listening to this episode can tell all of us are such fans of this album, and we sort of feel like we have permission to do that because we're not really just patting ourselves on the back. We're kind of patting each other on the back. I'm just so impressed with your guys' work. And again, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. And, it's something that I think we're all going to just really remember fondly.
Absolutely, man. I'm so excited to see what happens with this. Well, before we play you guys out, let's talk just a little bit about the last track that you're about to hear. This is sort of serves as the credits theme of the second album, and this track was composed by Marty and myself. Marty, do you want to talk a little bit about what your role for this track was?
Yeah, this was another one of the pieces in that category that I alluded to earlier, where the original is one of my absolute favorites, and I think that's probably true for a lot of people, which made it very intimidating. This is one where I had sent a couple versions to the guys, and we knew that, no, these weren't the ones. This is too close. This is too far. And beyond what I shared with them, I went through quite a lot of variations, quite a lot of drafts. And finally, what we ended up landing on for the A melody is something I think a lot simpler than I was expecting, but it seems to kind of capture the mood. And then Will wrote these B sections that I think are just really beautiful, that really honor that Koji Kondo kind of emotional farewell.
Totally. So I think you guys should listen out to that repeated theme, because that's what Marty was talking about. But we hope you enjoy this track, and we hope you've enjoyed both of these albums. It's been so much fun for us to get to share all this music with you. So thanks again, guys. My name is Will Brueggemann.
My name is Karl Brueggemann.
And my name is Marty Brueggemann.
Have a great week, everyone.
Peace out.